You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
I want to make a quick introduction to first-time guest, Delaware Senate candidate Kevin Wade. And Kevin, you were introduced to us by a mutual friend. So first, welcome to the Final Say. And I know you have a short period of time, so if you would, please introduce yourself to the Final Say fans, and please educate us on what you're doing, who you are, what you're doing in Israel, and what it is that you found in your visit here.
Very good. Well, my name's Kevin Wade. I'm the Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate in Delaware. I've run a business for 30 years. I've learned that if you want to make a judgment on something, you have to have a personal impression. Some things you cannot have your actions be directed by briefing books or PowerPoint presentations. I know how much trouble there is in the Mideast and the threat that Israel is facing today, and I decided to take a trip here with the cooperation of some friends in Israel to make personal impressions. I expected to meet a few soldiers, talk to some government officials, and maybe some business leaders. As soon as I arrived at Ben Gurion, my friends here said, would you like to meet some soldiers right away? What then followed was being taken up to the Gaza frontier. I spent the entire evening there with soldiers coming out and going back into combat house-to-house operations. They were delighted to see an American there. They were surprised to see one so far forward. There were flares being dropped from helicopters overhead to kind of defeat the anti-air that Hamas uses. A number of rounds falling probably as close as 1,000 yards. One made my ears ring. The IDF soldiers, who I've come to respect so very much, didn't flinch, and I tried to follow their own example. I was invited to break bread with them, share our meal rations in a tent nearby. Had a chance to talk to them, get to know their stories, and I promised each and every one that I would give an honest report of who they are and why they're fighting to protect their homes and their families, not too many miles behind the frontier from Hamas rocket attacks.
Well, I will say this. Now, my understanding is you were in Ashkelon. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so for our listeners, Ashkelon.
Actually, I was several places. I've been traveling ever since I got here.
Okay, I was told that while in Ashkelon, you got to witness firsthand the Iron Dome batteries performing their life-saving grace, if you will.
Well, I'll tell you, on the way over here, not 35 minutes ago, we jerked the car to the side of the road and hit the ditch because there were two rockets coming up just to our right, and lucky for us, they were stopped and we had no harm. Just a little bit of gravel in our faces, and I got the all clear and back in the car to come up to Ben Gurion tonight. This is something the civilians, the people of Israel, deal with day by day. So the question for your audience is, if your children were being threatened, mortally threatened day after day, what would you do? And I think your listeners know what you would do, and that's what the people of Israel are doing. If there's one message go ahead.
I was going to say, on a personal note, I think we always try to project ourselves when we watch these things in the news. How would we respond? How would we act as fathers, as husbands, as men, etc.? But having actually been there, having to pull your car over and get in a ditch, was it what you expected, or was it a whole other level of reality and intensity? The first two nights up at the frontier, trust me, I was farther than any civilian except for perhaps an embedded reporter. The action is intense, flashes on the horizon, flashes and then thuds. They walk their way closer to you, each one getting louder and brighter, and you begin to think, I wonder where the next one's going to land. You look in the faces of soldiers who have been in combat, and this is house-to-house work, digging out rat holes. I met an American citizen from Chicago. I won't use his name. He went in leading a squad of 14 IDF infantry, and because of the casualties they've taken, he's now responsible for nearly 40 IDF infantry. He's about 22, 23 years old.
I got him at a break, and he said his friends back home are worried about final exams at college, and he has different responsibilities here. The tone and the mood is one of great responsibility. No one is joyful. No one is gleeful. This isn't a parade ground operation. There's tough work to be done. Hamas is tough, and they're getting it done.
Now, I just left Israel myself. In fact, literally, I was leaving Israel within hours of the three boys who were taken hostage and obviously killed immediately afterward. That was the catalyst for all.
One of whom was an American.
Absolutely. I'm glad you said that. So, speaking from an American perspective, and also for point of reference, I happen to be Jewish, and I appreciate the congressmen and women and senators, Democrat or Republican, going over there, because I believe the White House and team has done a really poor job. And I wanted to ask you two questions related to that. One is, while I was over there, I was surprised that even the most traditionally self-described, far left hippie, 60s hippies, radical lefties were very negative on this administration support. And relative to that, I want to get your opinion on what you're hearing from them. But also, I don't know if you saw this, but a Pew Research poll that just came out 2 days ago showed that in the U.S., the Republican support supporting Israel and blaming Hamas is significantly higher than the Democrats. In other words, within the Democratic Party, you have getting close to a 50% symbiosis, thinking that Hamas may be the good guy.
What's at work is an overreaching attempt at moral equivalence. Moral equivalence is where you try to see benefit in both arguments, but this is not an academic situation here. Moral equivalence, the seeking of moral equivalence is simply a refusal to act on judgment because your conscience presents hard actions that must be taken. There's no moral equivalence among the moms and the dads here in Israel, and there's no moral equivalence at work in the minds and in the hearts of these 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old IDF soldiers, all of whom have never seen combat before. In fact, even the junior officers and middle officers have not seen combat before because Israel blessedly has been able to avoid heavy combat actions for a number of years. But after over 8,000 rocket attacks on Israel, they have to protect their families, and that's what this is about. The soldiers want to see this job done. They understand that they work under political guidance and they will obey orders. But if they had their druthers, if they had their choice, they'd like to see Hamas rooted completely out of Gaza so that they can live in peace and their younger brothers don't have to go in another 3 years.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up, this is Brett, I'm glad you brought up the moral equivalency issue, because I believe that it actually prolongs the conflict and increases the significance of the problem. Because, just as if we were being rocketed over the Mexican border, we would respond. If we were trying to make that an equivalent argument, you would only postpone length of time in dealing with that particular issue. And Israel, I think if they don't really properly deal with Hamas right now, in a year from now, 2 years from now, we're going to see the same exact operation happen, and I think that the world community has to recognize that as well.
Yeah, what will happen if this thing is called up short, Hamas will flee and they will simply rearm. And the world's media, which is leaning very left in this situation, has to understand if you build a rocket factory and put blackboards and student desks on the first floor, it's still a rocket factory. The shame attaches to Hamas, not IDF.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can, just in a few moments that we have left with you, you're returning back to Delaware, and you are running for Senate, so I just want to give you an opportunity to address some of the issues that you're working on, not just with regards to foreign policy, but what are some of the things that you're looking to work on when you're in Washington, D.C.?
We've got to secure that border and get these sad kids back home. If you found a 14-year-old wandering down the roadside, I don't think you want to take them to a government warehouse. You just want to get them home, and that's what needs to be done at the southern border. We have broken trust between the government and their people. We need to act in good faith for the people who own this country. That's the citizens. We are citizens, not suspects. And rebuild a government that is trusted by the people and can work in the best interests of the folks who are keeping the clocks wound and the trains running on time. Washington thinks that we exist for their benefit. That's not the case. They work for us, and it's time for people to give orders to the ones working for us, and that's in Washington, and that happens in November. I'd like to ask your listeners, if you use Twitter, go to Twitter at Kevin Wade 2014. That's at Kevin Wade 2014. I've been streaming tweets for the past 72 hours. I think it'll make some very interesting reading for those who may not be getting the full story on CNN.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's fantastic, and I got to tell you, Kevin, I agree with what you've just said, and I think that if we strengthen what we do here in America by leading that example, it'll only help out our allies such as Israel, our friends in other parts of the world, because you can't be a republic and not stand for it and expect others to.
I'll tell you, a weakness and indecision at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is not a foreign policy.
No.
The president we have is absent without permission, and the world is drifting into chaos, and America is descending into a deeply cynical division. It's time for we the people to stand up, go shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, and set things right in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin, do you have a website that people can go check out some of your issues?
Yeah,
and
please go. It's wadeforusssenate.com, WADEFORs, USSenate.com, and please leave a comment. Please show support. Please volunteer if you can. We're all in this thing together. I am taking on a self-described the most progressive senator in the U.S. Senate. He's a rubber stamp for Harry Reid. He's not an independent voice for Delaware or anyone else in the country. And I'll do it alone, but I'd like to have some support.
Oh, sure. Now, I've gone down to Delaware quite a few times over the years working with several organizations, including the Faith and Freedom chapter.
Very good. Very good people there.
Oh, they sure are, and so I'm glad that you're familiar with them, and I would definitely seek those folks out.
I will do that, and I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to describe what's really happening here with the IDF at the frontier with Gaza.
Absolutely, and Kevin, do us a favor. First, get home safely, and when you have the opportunity, please reach out to us, and you're welcome to join us again sometime in the future.
Thanks so much, and one final thing to your listeners.
Sure.
Pray for Israel.
We do every day. Thank you, Kevin. We
Thanks
really
so much.
appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
And tell the people there that you see we're thinking of them.